Okay, hi there. In this video, I wanted to discuss some of the pieces of music that have been personally very significant or inspiring or emotionally powerful for me. Usually on YouTube, you only get to see me playing the guitar and that's it. And you never get to hear anything about what the piece actually means to me or what the backstory is behind a composition. So here I'll share some reflections on meaningful pieces of music that I've experienced over the years. The first piece I'll talk about is the prelude from the Lute Suite in E major, BWV 1006A by Johann Sebastian Bach. It's the one that starts like this. I remember when I was around 18 years old and I was just beginning to play classical guitar music. I watched the video of John Williams performing this piece, and I was, just totally mesmerized and enchanted by this composition. To me, it felt like a very sunny and cheerful tune in many parts, but also very developmental and complex and sophisticated. But anyways, the years went by and somehow I never got around to actually learning how to play the piece myself. But when I finished my graduation recital in music school, this was the first piece of music that I decided to learn. It was kind of funny. I remember my recital was in the evening, but then I had to go back to campus right away the next morning for some other commitments, so I was like completely exhausted, out of my mind, and I didn't really get a chance to like unwind or like sleep properly very much. And even though I was so burnt out, like as soon as I had a break that morning, I went straight to a practice room and started learning how to play this piece. And I was just like so happy to be able to like finally learn how to play this after so many years had gone by. Unfortunately, I don't, remember it. I don't remember how to play it all anymore, but it still probably is my favorite piece by Bach. So another piece that I feel very happy and uplifted about is one of my own compositions, a miniature that I wrote in 2020 called Slap Happy. I wanted to write a piece that was guaranteed to make you laugh and smile. And so this composition is like absurdly goofy. I think I wanted to prove that it's okay for classical musicians to have a sense of humor, perhaps. So I used these like slapping or tapping techniques. It's kind of just like tapping onto the strings to make like a truly ridiculous sounding composition. Originally, I imagined goofy, like cartoon bears, like dancing to this song. But about a year ago, my friend from university, TJ Liao, made a video of birds and ducks dancing to his performance of the piece. So now I always imagine a duck waddling back and forth to this piece. So here's a sample of what it sounds like. So from the same set of miniatures, I wrote another one called Healing. This one was supposed to be more like an embodiment of unconditional love and compassion. In my own imagination, I thought of it as if there is this young child who has just had like a horrible life filled with suffering, all kinds of physical, emotional, and mental hardships, but kind of like the ghosts from Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol. There's this angel or ghost who comes to show this child that there is actually goodness in the world too, and that healing and recovery is possible. And as part of this, the angel takes the child to visit you, and for some reason the only thing you're allowed to do to help the child is to play this piece of music. And in a way, we all have at least a little bit of that sort of suffering child within all of us, and I try to remind myself to think kindly towards the audience whenever I'm performing, any piece of music, not just this one. But anyways, here's a bit of how this piece sounds. Next, I'll talk about the Nocturnes, Opus 4 by Johann Caspar Mertz. The Nocturne 1, number 1 and number 2 from this opus were both pieces that I learned how to play when I was about 18 or 19 and quite new to classical guitar. And this opus was one of the first things I decided to record and upload to YouTube after I graduated from university and I'd bought a good quality microphone to record with. It's hard to describe why these pieces are so enticing, really, but they have this fantastic romantic quality to them that's very expressive and genuine, I would say. And now this recording is one of my most popular videos on YouTube, so obviously a lot of other people enjoy these pieces too. I was even inspired to record them when I had first learned them back in the year 2010, so I'll treat you to a snippet of my original 2010 recording of them now. Another meaningful nocturne to me is my own composition that I completed in 2019, which I called the Nocturne-Lullaby. I based this piece upon the famous lullaby by Brahms, the one that's... that one, I'm sure you all recognize it. But I use this lullaby in a rather morbid way. I was inspired from a Buddhist story from the Dhammapada, verse 114. The story goes that there was a woman named Kisa Gotami who had a child, but unfortunately the child died when it was still a baby. She became so overcome with grief that she wandered around the city carrying her deceased child in her arms and asking everyone she met to do something to bring her child back to life. Eventually she was starting to really act kind of like a crazed person, who had totally lost her mind, and so the Buddha went to her to help. He basically sent her on an impossible mission to find a mustard seed from a household where no one in the family had ever died. So she looked and looked, but of course Kisa Gotami couldn't find any immortal families. So the Buddha, taught her a lesson about death and impermanence and so on. But anyways, this composition was meant to depict Kisa Gotami's feelings before she met the Buddha, when she was still in a kind of delirious denial of her child's death. It's like she's trying to sing the lullaby to trick herself into believing that the child has only gone to sleep for a while, but really she knows the truth of it, yet isn't ready to accept or move on yet, and you get the idea. I was also reading the book Wuthering Heights at the time of composing this piece, so my head was certainly filled with a lot of dark and moody kind of sentiments. So here's a sample of the Nocturne-Lullaby. So traveling back in time to another piece that inspired me quite a lot in the early days of my classical guitar playing was the famous Spanish Romance. I'm sure you know it. Of course, very famous. I have a lot of different memories with this piece, but there's one that's rather unusual. I was playing at a wedding, and near the end of my set, the people were all just, talking and eating, and no one was really paying attention to me anymore. But this young, maybe 10 or 12-year-old boy walked up and asked if it was okay to record me on his cell phone. So I said, sure, why not? And I thought, what the heck, I'll play Spanish Romance. So for that gig, I was outdoors, and I was sitting under a tree, and I had the bad luck to have a stick or a leaf or some part of the tree fell and hit my guitar while I was playing. There's still this little dent on my guitar. You probably can't see it in this poor quality video, but right here there's this dent, this mark on my guitar from that. So I don't think it happened exactly while I was playing Spanish Romance, but the song and the tree attacking my guitar are always very strongly associated in my mind, so that's usually what Spanish Romance reminds me of, I guess. So continuing on with the topic of Spanish music, I recently wrote an etude called Matador's Nemesis, which has a lot of elements of Spanish or flamenco music. I initially wanted it to sound like heavy metal music, but it turned out mostly just sounding Spanish instead, but that's okay. With this piece, I had the imagery of yourself being an enraged bull, and instead of going after a human being, maybe there's somehow some embodiment of a thing that is just purely wicked and harmful and terrible, and you get to be this bull that goes after this thing with your horns. You get to gore it and wipe it off the face of the earth forever. So it's a aggressive but cathartic kind of feeling with this piece. So here's a bit of how this one sounds. Some of you may be surprised to hear that I actually played electric guitar for several years before I started playing classical guitar. When I was 14 years old, I was absolutely obsessed with the band Black Sabbath. I must have memorized the guitar part to at least 25 or 30 of their songs. but songs like Iron Man and War Pigs and Paranoid were particularly captivating to me in the beginning. I started playing guitar when I was 12 or 13, I think, but learning how to play Black Sabbath songs was what transformed me from someone who just like kind of played guitar a little bit for fun into someone who was like totally obsessed with playing guitar. The distorted electric guitar just sounded so powerful and cool, and the songs weren't overly difficult to play either, so it was just like extremely fun to do. So in a way, I probably owe a lot of my musical career down to the initial inspiration I drew from Black Sabbath and other classic rock and heavy metal bands. So I think I'll wrap things up here by talking about one more of my compositions. This one is called Meditatio, from a set of 4 songs for guitar. In my mind, these 4 pieces were an expression of the way I felt when I was first becoming extremely interested in meditation and Buddhism and spiritual pursuits. This was in my early to mid-20s, and of course not very many other people at that age are interested in these topics, or like not many people at like any age are really. So I had this dichotomy of feeling much calmer and like happier and peaceful from my spiritual practice, but also feeling quite alienated and disconnected from a lot of my peers. So it's like this feeling of isolation that's also quite serene, or like something like that. So the main 2-note melody that I used in this piece was taken from a meditation chant that I heard in meditation sits at my university that I attended for a few months. It goes like this. It's a simple, repetitive 2-note chant. I've unfortunately forgotten the words or the meaning of this chant, but as soon as I heard it, I knew I would use it for the theme of a composition. So here's how this one turned out. Well, thanks for listening to all that. I hope it was interesting to hear how music can be personally meaningful and emotionally significant in a wide variety of ways. Sometimes it's hard to articulate in words exactly how music makes us feel, but in other ways we can express it, and I think it's important that we make an effort to do this, even though it's highly personal and subjective. If any of you have interesting stories about certain pieces, please share it in the comments or make a video of yourself describing it and send me the link. I would love to hear from you. And I hope that through sharing our personal experiences, we'll all feel a bit closer and like we're part of a healthy musical community. So thanks again, and have a good day.